representing modernisation programmes. Thank you for joining us. First, I'd just like to say a quick word about these roundtables. Our aim with the magazine has always been to provide a forum within which people can exchange ideas and information about air traffic management. The pandemic has forced us to look closely at how we do things, and the result has been this series of online roundtables where instead of within the magazine, we can exchange ideas and information in person. This first roundtable has been made possible with the help of our sponsors, DFS Aviation Services. I'd like to invite you to download their brochure, which is available in the handouts tab on the right of your screen. So today we will discuss what the coming decade holds for ATM in terms of technology. Although the pandemic has set the tone for the short-term future, there is much innovation and many emerging trends that could impact the way that ATM is run and where investments are made. We'll be discussing the benefits and issues around topics such as digitalization, airspace management, remote towers, and UTM. But it's just for me to set the stage. We're lucky to have with us a panel of experts who within the next hour will give us the benefit of their experience and knowledge. So I'd like to introduce you to, first of all, Friedrich Wilhelm Menger, who is the Chief Technology Officer of DFS and also its Managing Director of Technology. He started his career in mobile telecoms and before his current role was Chief Information Officer at BVG, Berlin's transport company. Klaus Meyer is Chief Technology Officer of Skyguide and leads its engineering and technology department. Early in his career, he ran an engineering company in the mobile telecom sector before working on business and development in new technology areas for Swiss Air and Schindler. Finally, Andy Taylor is Chief Solutions Officer of Remote Towers for NATS and has experience developing and delivering innovative ATC solutions for customers all over the world, which increase airport capacity and operational performance. I'd just like to briefly give each panel member an opportunity to introduce themselves. Andy, can you give me some background on what you're doing at the moment? It doesn't look like you're in Singapore right now. You are, but I believe it's a project over there, right?
Yes, thanks Ben for inviting me to join. And yes, so like most of us, I am working from home in the UK. But that doesn't in fact stop NATS to continue its work across the UK and in fact around the world. So that's definitely something that remains unchanged, and I continue to support our UK operation and airports and air navigation service providers around the world at this stage. We are, yes, working with CAS in Singapore on a digital tower deployment there, which is quite mature and in fact has been in operation in the last 12 months. And then we're also very focused on the UK, and as you've already mentioned, with the pandemic, the recovery to that and what our customers in the UK require. And when I say customers, that's both from internally within NATS, what my colleagues require in operations, but it's also what our airlines and our airports that we serve also require from us, which some of it is what we were providing before, and some of it is changing. But certainly, technology and digital tower technology is a key part of that. And actually, what I'm certainly seeing is an acceleration into that technology path by a lot of organisations, including my own.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Andy. Friedrich, do you want to give me some background on DFS and some of the initiatives maybe that you're doing at the moment there?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I mean, business in Germany for us is as challenging as everywhere. We had a decline of 56% of our figures compared to 2019, and therefore it was a difficult year. For me personally, it was an interesting and challenging year because my first day in the business was March 2nd last year, and as you already mentioned, I'm a child of other businesses and industries, and the ANSP business was completely new to me. The position I'm running in Deutsche Flugsicherung is more or less new as well. I mean, at least it was not there for the past years, and it was shaped new. And the idea was to follow the what we see, that technology has more and more impact on what we do as an ANSP, and to give it a voice and more strength and power to really develop projects and topics. And that was what I was hired for. I mean, to start a technical firework. But what happened on March 2nd, I mean, that was one of those days where we still kept asking ourselves if we are still allowed to shake hands if we meet. And only 2 weeks later, that answer was given for months that we don't do that. And I had to start to cut projects and to cut investments. And that's something what I really don't like, what many of us maybe don't like, to invest energy in doing less. But that was the challenge of the past year. I think in the second half, we got the chance to come up with a new strategy and technology to really give a better view and understanding and idea on where we want to go in the future and how we want to steer the wheel. And I guess I will have the chance to give some more details on that later on. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, great, Friedrich. Thank you for that, and thanks for helping make today happen. It's great. It's great for everyone to be here today. Klaus, I think I read in your bio that one of your tasks is moving ATM systems to be more flexible. I mean, can you give me some background on how you and SkyGuide are doing that? Just quickly, what are you up to at the moment?
Well, we are continuing with our virtual center program that we kicked off in 2014, basically facing the situation that we had to replace 2 legacy systems. And the question was, how would we do that? And as we all see at the moment too, ANSPs are not the most flexible and resilient when it comes to business cycles. So we said very early, we need to do that differently, and we need to take the step into the future. And that was also the reason why I joined SkyGuide in 2015, because of that idea of the virtual center, basically saying we want to provide air traffic services location independently. And that's the focus. We are on this journey. We have taken a big milestone this year, and we hope to finish everything by 2024. And I'm happy to go a little bit more details later on.
Fantastic. We look forward to hearing from you all about this, about plans for the coming decade. I'll just go through quickly now for everyone's benefit, just some information about the format of the webinar. So during the first half, Klaus and Friedrich and Andy will talk amongst themselves, discussing some key questions. I'd encourage everybody in the audience to submit any questions they have for them via the Q&A tab, which you should see on the right of your screen. You won't see those questions immediately. They go into the system, and then during the second half, everyone will see those questions once they're published and posed to the panel. Yeah, that's it. We're going to start with the big topic, I guess. Bad and good. Hopefully, we can pick out the good within COVID-19 as well as the bad. Klaus has very kindly volunteered to answer first. So Klaus, what's been the impact of the pandemic on your plans and on upgrade projects within SkyGuide? Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And like everybody else, SkyGuide and Switzerland was hit badly by this pandemic too. And I would say we are talking about a new normal for the time after the pandemic, because we don't believe we will go back to the times that we experienced before. The situation is dramatic. Friedrich already outlined that from a German perspective. The same is here. We had to send people home, first of all, on what we call short-time work. So because there's just not enough work for our controllers. And the other question was what's happening then on our portfolio and the projects that we were running, in particular the strategic projects like the virtual center. And here it was interesting that, obviously like every other ANSPs, we needed money from the government, because from a business model perspective, cash was draining quickly and we would have been bankrupt in fall last year. So the government came back, supported us, because yes, we are part of national infrastructure. But the government also said, you get the money, but this money is tied to deliverables. And they wanted to know, how would we deal with this structural problem that we have as an ANSP? Because we are not resilient enough. If there's a downturn, we have too many controllers. If there's an upturn, we are most of the time not fast enough to bring enough controllers onto the sector. So this structural problem, they wanted from us an answer. And here we could pull out again our plans and the business case for the virtual center and explain to them why the virtual center is so critical for us in order to be able to become more resilient, to deal with the peaks and the troughs that will come normally in a normal business cycle. And that was a good news for us, because it helped us to continue to focus on the strategic program. And what was also positive news for us was sending people home and have them work from home worked much better than we thought. Initially, we were scared that the delivery will suffer. But what we could experience was that the objectives were met, the milestones were met. The challenges we see more on real change improvement processes, because there you need to come together and talk more face to face. But delivering objectives, new software, we had basically, if I look back in 2020, was a successful year in the delivery. So that worked out fine.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. So it's fair to say there's been a sharpening of focus and an internal look there within SkyGuide. Friedrich, has that had the same effect within DFS? Have you had to look at things like resiliency and the way and really come to grips with the strategy moving forward?
Yes, it was similar. And I mean, if we talk about the effects of the crisis, I'm pretty sure that everybody who is responsible for IT or technology or digitalization says, well, not everything was bad in the past year, although we had to struggle a lot. And that was for sure similar with Deutsche Flugsicherung. I really was astonished about the ability. I mean, we are not really public sector, but quite close to public sector in Germany. And the culture of the overall company is close to what we would understand by public sector. And how fast we really did adopt the ability to work remote. I mean, for those roles who were able to do that. I mean, in normal times, that would have taken years or decades. And in those times, it was a finger snip or at least in weeks. And that was, that was fantastic. Not everything in the past year was fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Andy, do you have any comment on that? You mentioned in the introduction that there's been a lot of support throughout the organisation you've been providing.
Yes. So again, what Klaus and Friedrich have mentioned resonates from an ANSPs perspective. And I think we've seen a few things in addition to the points mentioned. Unfortunately, at the moment, we find ourselves in another lockdown, but that's kind of given us a bit of a sneak preview as to how the return to some kind of normal may look and how rapid it can be at times. And certainly towards the latter part of 2020, we did see a resurgence of traffic. Not anything like it was in 2019, but nevertheless a significant sudden return, which then dropped away as suddenly as the latest lockdown kind of bit. But that's given us a view as to the kind of quick response that will be required potentially. But I think the other thing that we've seen is in the same way that this is quite an accepted norm now, these kind of online forums and indeed our workforce is working remotely, and that's something that everyone is very comfortable with from a corporate to an individual perspective, I think, in general. We're also seeing changes, and I think the recovery that we're expecting is not necessarily going to be a recovery of simply the kind of traffic that we had before and the kind of segregation that we were operating under before. So I think we're expecting new technologies, new types of aviation to have increased, and potentially to have to operate in that kind of much more flexible and shared airspace environment, which from a technology perspective, I think then is clear that kind of difference is going to require different technology to support our operation and the people in the operation. It's not, integration of large amounts of unmanned aviation is always going to be the kind of thing that would be difficult to operate in a standard traditional model of air traffic management. But supporting that with technology that's able to track multiple types of aircraft and unmanned aircraft at the same time as manned aviation, with those changing peaks and troughs, I think that kind of has given us that other clear view that that the technology and the solutions need to change and change rapidly as well.
That's interesting. Thank you, Andy. It leads me to my next question about implementing technology, and obviously. There's never a bottomless pit of money, but things have become a lot tighter because of COVID for many of us. I mean, Friedrich, are you prioritizing technology projects now? I mean, because it's so vital moving forward. What are you doing?
Yeah, we do prioritize. I mean, it's with regard to the question on where to invest in these days. We need to take a look in a first iteration to the past. I mean, I bet that, for example, Klaus would have been very happy if he already would have a virtual center or would have had one. And so those things will be very important for the future too. And while talking about prioritization in investments, to me, digitalization starts with the workforce itself. And I don't know how the situation in Europe or even outside of Europe currently is, but does every employee in all our companies already have a mobile device to have contact to the company? Do we have wireless LAN everywhere? I'm a happy man to announce that in 2021, we will get rid of a Lotus Notes implementation at Deutsche Flugsicherung. So there are many simple things to sort out and to really get closer to the future. But with regard to our core business, the prioritization from the years before and now changed in terms of, in the past years, it was important to do everything to gain capacity. And that changed totally. So capacity is not the major topic anymore. It's money, and it's, while preparing for the future, it's flexibility and speed. So we prioritize projects which help us to become more flexible, which basically means that we need to become less complex, and which give us speed to change faster in the future. And there's one key element while talking about technology to do that, and that's based on cloud technology. Our today's systems literally stand next to each other side by side. And we need to give up that kind of integration to a horizontal approach where we use cloud technology and applications on top. And then what I would always say, a very decoupled and very thin controller working position. The integration of the working positions from today's perspective are by far too deep. And if we want to gain speed for the future, there needs to be a decoupled approach. So if you ask me, speed, flexibility, rules, and cloud is an important element. And the decoupling of the overall infrastructure in parts, modularization, standardization is key.
I'm just interested, Friedrich, just to follow up quickly on that. Does that mean capacity, does it not play a role at all anymore, or are you still planning ahead further in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we expect the capacity to be on, the capacity need to be on the same level of 2019 in 2025. So 4 years to go to really invest in the right measures in technology in order to become flexible and future-proof. I mean, if you take a look on the requirements we get from the processes in these days, we typically have development cycles. We count them by years or even decades, and we need to be in a completely different situation by 25, because the business itself will change much faster than in the past, and money will be even less compared to the past for everybody in the whole business, from airlines, airports, and ANSPs as well.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else to add to that? Sure, Klaus?
So I'm very excited to listen to Friedrich, because I feel like, he mentioned the design principles of our virtual center, and I strongly believe this is really the way forward. And capacity is not an issue for us, most likely until 2025. But it's what Friedrich said. It's again the flexibility, the speed to be able to respond to it, because there's an up and a downturn, and we need to be able to use technology to do that, and not human beings and controllers as we've done so far. And so for me, this whole decoupling, this stopping of point-to-point connection, this spaghetti code that we have developed over 20, 30 years has to stop. We have to move from a vertically integrated system into a horizontal interconnected system. And I think that will give us this flexibility, and we are fully convinced about that. And I feel like here too, the prioritization that we are doing now, focusing even more on the virtual center, is also based on a sense of urgency that is suddenly around, because for years we're talking about there is no real sense of urgency in air traffic management because we are national infrastructure. If something happens, the government will support us. And now also within the ANSPs, we start to understand certain things cannot be taken for granted. And this is absolutely important that we really use that. And we say, it's a crisis, so stop complaining, see the opportunities we have now in doing things that we couldn't do before. And I think that's also what we do during our focusing and prioritization process. But it is not easy, because you need to make difficult decisions to say, where do you stop? Yeah.
Well, I think it's an old saying that there's opportunity in crisis, isn't there? I mean, Andy, do you see it in the same terms? I mean, are there other technologies that you see playing a role as well as virtualization and digitalization?
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with the points, and certainly flexibility, as I mentioned before, is absolutely going to be key. It was before, but the amount of flexibility required, both by the demands on the operation, but also the demands of the airports and airlines that pay for our service, because certainly from an ANSPs perspective, we're not government funded. We are paid by the service charges, so those must be justifiable, and we've got to be able to cover that for the foreseeable. But I think from the point of view of capacity, I mean, previously, yes, both in the UK and in our work around the world supporting other airports and ANSPs, we had been focused very much on getting the last drop of capacity out of operations and airports in particular. And yes, I think that last drop of capacity is likely not to be required, as previously mentioned, for a few years. However, there will be significant peaks, and we will need to be able to sort of match those demands. It would be easy to say, well, we just cut the service back and limit things, and that sort of keeps the finances okay. But that's not really what we would be, or our customers would be expecting from us from the point of view of the airlines would expect to be able to fly when they want to fly, as indeed we all would as passengers. And likewise, our airports expect to be able to operate and maximize their recovery. So from an ATM perspective, we've got to be able to deliver that. And that will mean turning the taps up and down as it goes. I think the points that have been mentioned around removing the silos of data, combining that, and then optimizing on the basis of that kind of data, whether it's either using artificial intelligence and automation, or whether it's simply supporting the people in the operation, my feeling is it's a mix of both. I think adds that kind of flexibility, and as Friedrich had mentioned, ensures that from the perspective of being able to manage the cash flows of our business, and likewise for our customers to be able to manage theirs, it's the approach we have to take. So the technology does require a focus on investment, and that's certainly from Nat's perspective what we're now focusing on. In fact, have been doing so whilst we've been in the depths of the pandemic.
So the focus has changed from capacity to resiliency, building resilience and flexibility. I mean, can somebody describe to me how, give me a tangible example of how that's introduced into ATM now? I mean, what sort of plans have we got around that? How can technology help deliver that flexibility? I mean, Klaus, you've mentioned the virtualization center. Is there any other ways, or is that the primary way, digitalization?
Well, digitalization is a big word, and it's basically solving everything. But I do believe it's still in its meaning. It means it's a change of an operating model. Mm-hmm. And it's not technology. It's really changing the business model, or if you don't have a real business, it's an operating model. And for us, again, the virtual center guides us towards changing that model that is built on the fact that we manage a sector, and we put controllers on a sector, and we try to optimize the management of the sector. And I do agree here with Andy that we have probably reached a point where we could squeeze it out. And we saw the summer of 2018 with the catastrophic situation in Europe, where we couldn't provide the capacity anymore, and how basically aviation was close to collapse. So we need to move away from that optimization of what I call the network node, instead of optimizing the network. And what for me, location independence or virtualization means is that we start to look at the network and optimizing the flight or the flow of flights through a network, and not the node anymore that we manage a sector. I always bring the example, and sometimes I might be insulting, but in the railway industry, we moved away from managing the traffic in the stations in the 60s. Today, all railways is done basically on a network level. So you do the deconflicting much earlier. But in order to do that, you need, again, move away from those silos of how we operate. We don't only have technology that operates in silos, but also our area control centers or our business processes are siloed. We optimize for each area control center instead of looking at the whole network. And I think there is the crux to also deal with the capacity. And with that, in my opinion, you can also become more efficient, because what are we doing today? Every area control center has buffers built in, because they have to go for the peak still. And the worst thing that can happen is not having the capacity. There is a skew towards, cost when you can't bring the capacity versus efficiency. So we'd rather be inefficient in order to bring the capacity. And those buffers, they are multiplied in Europe, 68 times from one area control center to the other. Mm-hmm. And these things can be taken out if you start to share not just information, but also responsibility across Europe. And this is why I strongly believe this is the way how we need to move forward, and why we should use the chance now by breaking up the silos and starting to sharing information like in other industries before.
So it sounds very clearly to me that this is not just implementing technology, but it's also demands changes in a management approach as well, and operating models. Friedrich, is that, you're nodding your head before, is that something that you'd agree with as a more fundamental change?
Absolutely. I mean, the ideas we already touched in the discussion is really to think from end to end, and to think and act from end to end, and not in those silos we do today. I mean, I give an example. If you want to do trajectory prediction, we by today should have had 4 or 5 different algorithms in place for different purposes, although doing quite similar things. And to have the ideal algorithm developed, that's not really a challenge or a problem. But to implement the idea algorithm everywhere I need it, that's a question of decades. And that shows how complex and how melted all together our today's systems are. And they really need to be cut in pieces. And I mean, it was not bad in the past, and all the systems we have in place today were good answers for the questions in the past. But the technological development will become faster and faster in the future, even more faster than we already experience it today. And flexibility is key, and therefore to cut everything in pieces and make it easily to be connected to new ideas, algorithms, solutions, partners, suppliers, whatever, that will be key.
I'd agree, and I think those silos also exist at an airport level between the airport operations, apron management services, and air traffic control. And again, you've got data systems that are separated on those fronts, and there are efficiencies required across some or all of those interfaces. On an airport by airport basis almost, because again it's very much dependent upon what the various stakeholders require in those areas. But I think being able to integrate that data together, bearing in mind that airports rarely have their own have a single system. There are multiple manufacturers, multiple data silos within an airport itself. Likewise, ANSPs have got those, and when we deal across the globe, we come across multiple different systems doing the same job. So, what I'm kind of looking at is a focus on sort of common platforms, open platforms, whereby we can break the barriers down. But I think the other part of it that we're then focused on is how you can speed up that algorithm delivery, because it's all very well to have the data, but you have to be able to process it and achieve what's required from that. And certainly we've been working pre-pandemic on artificial intelligence as a way of getting algorithms into a position to deploy much quicker than traditional programming by using AI and machine learning in specific use cases, so that again that was a way of accelerating into the operation. My feeling is that hasn't changed. If anything, this has just kind of increased our focus on that need.
Great, thanks, Andy. It appeared that I was on mute then, but the discussion might be better off if I'm on mute all the time. But the audience is here and they've asked a lot of questions. So I know we've got some set out that we haven't quite addressed, and we haven't addressed any specific technologies yet, really. But I'd really, to give us a hope of getting through some of these questions, I'd really like to pose them to you all now. I will start with one. So thank you everybody thank you the audience for asking these questions. I would like to start with one for Klaus, but feel free to answer anyone else if they want to. There's some acronyms here, Klaus, that I hope you can answer. This is from Kostas Christoforou. Again, apologies if I get pronounce anyone's name wrong. He wants to know what CBAs exist for VCs, and if you can reveal on what assumptions these new concepts of operation have been consulted. So I guess for virtualization centers. Does that make sense?
So basically, if I understand the question correctly, it's a question regarding the business case behind the virtual center, and I think here I can give some rough information where this is coming from, and for any details, I'm happy if someone reaches out to me that we can share more details. So there are two elements to it. One is, first of all, on the system side. That's on my responsibility, because if I look at my situation today, in Switzerland, I have an area control center in Geneva and one in Zurich. And Geneva has an own system and Zurich has an own system. And we have a split sky. The handover from Geneva to Zurich is the same like the handover from Reims to Geneva or from Zurich to Karlsruhe. So it's really a complex, vertically managed system. So first thing we do is to say, okay, let's not have two systems. Let's have one system. But this one system we set up such that it is modular, modern architecture. We picked a service-oriented architecture. Some people say, well, you are already behind the curve. We should go for containers and microservices. Doesn't matter. You go to a system that is open, that is modular, and that can connect to other services. So that's the first step. And with that, there is business cases in there, because now the provisioning of, for example, running your server infrastructure, your middleware, you give to expert organization who can scale it and offer that service at lower cost. So we have done that, and this is working, and we have a business case for that. It's also the system itself is not completely interconnected and locked anymore. Like, before, when you went to the big suppliers, they gave you a full system. Costs a heck of a lot of money. And every time we had an investment cycle, it costs by the factor 10 more. It's really amazing how the cost started to explode. So we broke that cycle, and we have a business case there. In our case, probably save about 10 million per year with this approach. The second one is then on the operational side. There the benefits are even bigger, because we don't have to operate now, as I said, in 120% capacity for the peaks. We can operate maybe at 90% and can share between the two locations the operation. We also have a basically flow through one airspace. And if you think about Switzerland, a tiny airspace is split in two. There's not even a distance between Washington and New York, but we have two. So there's inefficiencies in there, which we can take out by having basically less controllers on it. Then other elements that are enabled by the virtual center is you have a dynamic allocation of the airspace then. An aircraft flies into the Swiss airspace, doesn't call Geneva or Zurich, but calls Center Switzerland. And maybe because of the accent, they find out it's done by Geneva or by Zurich. And with that, we have, again, also an impact on the headcounts, where we do expect cost avoidance versus capacity increase, or even cost efficiency versus the current cost that we have.
Great, thanks, Klaus. I'm going to kind of try and summarize a few questions here. There's a few on finance, funnily enough, about the model moving forward over the next decade. There's one here from somebody called Paul Nearing. He's asking, is being dependent on service charges resilient enough to run an infrastructure? During 2020, we saw ANSPs delivering 60% of their capability during a period of 20% or less income. I guess it's a big question, but do we think business models have to change along with management and technology? I mean, is it viable moving forward in the future?
I mean, maybe I can give an idea on the answer from my perspective. First of all, by good reason, I'm the CTO and not the CFO, and therefore I have an opinion, but that's not really maybe taking into account every perspective. What I see is if we take a look on what the Digital European Sky idea provides as ideas to what we do and where we want to go, that are very brilliant ideas where we all are following the path which is given. But I personally would expect much more implication on the development of the ANSP scenarios in future based on economic questions. And that includes not necessarily that we need a completely different system where the money comes from and how is it is calculated. But the ANSPs of the future will much more ask themselves the question on where to partner, where to source, what to do on their own, and always have the implication in mind that there are different cost tags on that, and that they need to come up with an ideal or best solution for the environment they're in. I mean, countries have different opinions on what flexibility should be given to the local ANSPs, but all ANSPs will have in mind that they need to be flexible in terms of what am I doing on my own and what should I do with partners. For example, if Klaus would have had his virtual centers ready at the beginning of this pandemic, I mean, there would have been many of interested customers from all over Europe to ask if they could share their business with those virtual centers and those ideas behind. And that will be an idea we will see, I would predict, very often in the future, and a very interesting market for everybody.
Thanks, Adrian, for taking that. I'll pitch another question to you now. It's from Karl-Heinz Keller. He would like to know which of the technologies or concepts that have been mentioned up till now do you see as enabling the most flexibility to adapt to new normal? I mean, we've talked about quite a few, haven't we? Remote towers and virtualization centers. And is there any one particular technology you'd pick out of a hat that you think is going to prove most useful to ANSPs over the next 5-6 years, next decade? Any takers for that? It's a big question. Andy, you've switched your mic on.
Well, I mentioned it already from the point of view of being able to develop and deploy algorithms in order to deal with the amount of data that the operation requires in the future. And so from my perspective, the ability to deploy artificial intelligence within our systems, I think, is a particularly critical one. Because of the speed of that kind of deployment, and particularly with as I mentioned earlier, the change in the kind of operating environment that we may find ourselves in terms of unmanned flights. And I don't think a continued approach of segregation is a long-term one, and that therefore requires us to be able to support the people that we have in the operation in managing those unmanned flights within manned aviation as well. So I think technology, be it in a tower perspective or be it in a center, it is a digital and data and processing and support technology, I think, that we're talking about. And certainly from a tower perspective, when I talk about towers, I talk about digital towers, not remote towers specifically. Because doing things remotely, I think, has got a number of use cases. But I think with regards to what we need to do at airports, quite often it's just deploying the technology on the airport, which is able to manage the system with people overseeing that, sort of in a potentially changed way.
Thank you. Yes, Klaus, you want me to?
I would really underline what Andy said. I think one thing we probably have troubles to fathom at the moment is the impact of what this whole unmanned sector has on the manned aviation side. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think they are big disruptors, and behind those big disruptors are big, powerful companies, much more powerful than what we're doing in ANSPs today. And they have a lot of political clout too, and they will push into it. And they have a complete different approach in the way of how they would manage an airspace. Yeah, I'm just, Andy alluded to that, simulation. We don't use simulation, real-time simulation at all. If you look at remote ID and you want to do deconflicting in the UTM world, you will do that because you will calculate the lowest risk flight path. Yeah, and this is done in real time. And so I think there will be a lot of pressure coming in there. If someone asks me what is today's technology that we need to focus on, then I would say open architectures, open connected system. We have to stop implementing systems that are locked and do not communicate with each other. We need to go transversal, and everybody has to now invest in that to say, how do we connect? Because we can't do artificial intelligence. We can't do machine learning. We can't do digitalization if we do not share data, if we don't aggregate data, because this lives off the fact that we share data. And here I would say that would be the first step. But watch the UTM piece. Please, Frederick.
Bill, I really would like to add something to what my colleagues just said. I mean, if you would ask me to answer the question which technology is key in one word, I would say cloud. It's a cloud. Independent of what discussions we have at Deutsche Flugsicherung, we always come back to the same view that our ability to make use of cloud technologies is on the critical path for almost every project. And I saw one question in the Q&A session. Maybe I am allowed to ask it myself. It is. While talking about decoupling, what do we want to decouple? And maybe one more detail on that. On the ground in the south, we have the cloud technology. That's independent from ATM. I mean, it's performant, of course, and it's very well controlled, but it's cloud technology. There is no specific hardware, no specific operating system, maybe no specific database, etc., etc. On top of that, and that's the first line of decoupling, we have applications. Maybe the applications we have in place today, if they are cloud ready, maybe different applications, new applications, modified applications. And on top of the application layer, we basically have the CWPs. And again, it's decoupled. We need to make use of the functions in the application layer, highly flexible in the CWPs. And the today's CWP in some ANSPs, you see plenty of screens, different screens with different layouts. We won't see that anymore in 2030. There will be basically one screen, one big screen, or one big screen consisting of small screens, but it's basically something you can change very quickly, maybe even agile, and adopt new procedures, new ideas of working for the controllers very quickly and easily in making use of the decoupled applications. And within developing the decoupled applications in the future state, you don't have to worry about operating systems, hardware, etc., etc. And that will be the major sets of decoupling you will see.
You can concentrate more on just doing your task. Is that on focus? You can have yeah, okay, I understand. There's a question here that I'd like to ask from Manfred Moore, who asks really about the barriers to this change, to these changes that perhaps COVID-19 is forcing the sector to make. He mentions that this concept of sharing information has been around for quite a long time now. He names the IKEA swim concept. I mean, what are the real kind of barriers to this kind of siloed thinking that have to be overcome still? Does anyone want to comment on that? I hear a lot about integration and sharing all the time in this sector. Yes, please, Klaus.
I think we all heard those excuses many times. I think it's a little bit a poisonous setup that we have. On the one hand, we are in the safety business, and on the other hand, it's so highly regulated. And on the other hand, there's also very much, there are political interests with also a social interest behind there. And this combination makes it very difficult, and all three elements have to be basically tackled at the same time. And just to show you the challenges we have been facing moving towards a modern infrastructure by using a cloud setup, or we call a virtual setup for our platform. From a regulator perspective, it was a big challenge to assess the compliance with the current safety regulations. The main reason is that we look at, again, a fully integrated solution from the software to the hardware. And what we're doing now is we decouple that. So where is the safety relevance? So where do we need to do a safety certification? And where is it just a quality or service level? And are we willing to go that way to say, look, the whole infrastructure, the computing infrastructure, the platform is just a general infrastructure where I have a service level with an availability. That's good enough. This is not related directly to safety. These things are not reflected in today's regulation, neither from EASA nor in many of the other countries, I assume. So wherever we take that step, this is a very difficult discussion that we have to bring the regulator along. So the regulator is going through the same learning curve as we do in order to do their job, to make sure that what we're doing is safe. So this is one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge comes from jobs. We have created silos, not just as an ACC and with the systems, but even within our own organization. I have experts, very specific experts, and they fight for their lives, for their jobs, not to share too much, because it's a fundamental paradigm shift that we had before, where we said everything is really certified, it is specialized, to go to areas where we say, no, it's not happening anymore. So these are hurdles that we have to tackle, and we need to continuously I would say, educate and take those partners in the boat so they can go through the learning curve and build up trust to change. Yeah.
So some great points there, Klaus. I mean, it's certainly people are resistant to change and like to protect their domains that they create. Friedrich, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. Just one story came to my mind. In this week, I for the first time had contact to one project where we contribute as DFS to the CESAR projects. And the question which is raised in that project is based on the historical trajectories of airplanes, can we determine the specific of each airplane in order to predict future trajectories better? I mean, it's a combination of information about engines, weight, etc. And for example, I mean, the information on which engine is connected to one airplane, that is known on this planet. So why do we invest ourselves in this type of workarounds to use big things like artificial intelligence in order to recalculate those informations to make use of them in the process of trajectory prediction? And that, I mean, the original question, as I remember, was about the swim layer, etc. I see an urgent need in the whole industry from ANSPs among themselves, within themselves, but especially as well with airports and airlines, to be much more open in sharing data. That really would help to make us much more efficient in many directions.
Thank you, Friedrich. It's interesting. I'd like to pose this question here from Michael Bryan, and he's kind of thinking a bit further outside of what we've talked here to talk about airlines, who, after all, are very important to your business. I mean, how can you? He wants to know. I mean, do you see them taking more responsibility in the management of capacity? I mean, how are their roles going to change moving forward over the decade? I mean, what do you expect of them? I mean, how does that figure into technology implementation programs that you do decide to do over the next decade? Does anyone want to take that?
Yeah, maybe I jump in and then leave it to Friedrich and Andy. I feel like the airlines, they want to create, they need capacity, they want to grow and fly as much as they can, and as easily and as flexibly and as environmentally compliant as possible. And we must not be afraid as an ANSP to work with airlines, because they are our customers and they are the paying customers. Yeah? They are the ones, not at the moment, but before they paid us. And what I feel like as an ANSP, we need to be more open to really work with the airlines in addressing these what I call what Friedrich called end-to-end processes. The end-to-end process, not just within the ANSP, they go to the customers and to the suppliers in our case. And I think we still live in a kind of a bubble in the ATM world, because we provide a public service and we provide what we can and then use what is available. And I think that shift needs to take place, that we work much closer with the airlines and also much closer with the airports. And I strongly believe if there's the willingness is there, then we can also start opening up our systems and share data. And we have an interesting discussion here in Zurich where we're very close. But passenger data, well, the airline's also not so happy to share passengers data with the airport, but the airport needs that too. So what's the smartest way of approaching that and build that on trust and say, look what happened in the global supply chain when the various players learned to look at the same information and optimized a supply chain. Why can't we do that at the airports too? With technologies available where, who owns the data becomes a secondary question. But I think we need to want to break out of that, I call it ATM bubble we are still in, saying we are public service and we do what we can, and you have to take what we have.
Anybody want?
I was going to just add on to the back of that, because yes, I think it's key to work with the other stakeholders in our industry. And we have been working with airlines both before the pandemic and during. And I think there is an element where potentially we need to adjust. So, even during the downturn, we have seen aircraft that have arrived a lot earlier than were anticipated. And it not being an efficient operation, despite the fact that we're well below capacity because of that sort of early arrival. I think my CEO kind of described it recently as when you turn up at somebody's house for a party, but you turn up 20 minutes early and they're still in the shower. It's not it just isn't done. So. What we need to be able to do is to be able to work and flex around these kind of things. So that does require some two-way data sharing. At the same time, looking at what we will be working with as far as technology is concerned on board the aircraft. The aircraft itself is a pretty much closed kind of system as far as ATM is concerned. There are certain bits of it that do communicate with us, but a lot of it is separated from us. We have been working with airlines around accessing through EFB, the electronic flight bags, so that we can work more efficiently with the flight crew themselves of individual aircraft and get information to and from them. But I think, in terms of will the aircraft themselves change significantly over the next 5 years or so? Possibly not, particularly given that airlines themselves are now having to come out of a considerable period of shock and recover their businesses. So, there may not be necessarily all of the changes that we would want to see, but we just still need to be able to work more flexibly. And as I say, for me, that potentially is down to an individual aircraft to controller interaction through whichever platforms are available to us, and working with the airlines is the way of getting that access two-way.
Thanks. Just a few minutes left. Friedrich, would you like to comment on that? There's quite a few questions here on safety and security as well of working in the cloud. Is that something that figures in what you're saying?
Well, first to comment on what we just said, I agree with my colleagues. I mean, the question to really make most use of the data we have and all the others have will be key in the future. But then we are coming back to our technological capabilities to share data and data formats we have in place today is difficult, and a question of years. We need an approach, a technological approach, that allows us to make use of APIs, API connectors, for example, to share data efficiently with all the others in a very simple way and simple approach and cost-efficient way. Yes, that was my comment. And now back to the question. Can you please repeat the question?
Apologies, I was on mute, and I did jump around slightly there. There's quite a few questions here about safety and security of data within the cloud environment. I just wondered how you figure that moving forward over the decade is going to work out.
Yeah, maybe I can start, but I'm very interested in the comments of my colleagues too. I mean, what I was wondering about in my early days was I thought I'd join an ANSP and start evangelization for cloud services and technologies. And what happened in reality? In reality, it happens that I met my colleagues from the IT security department, and they said, Fred, we need to go to the cloud. It's much safer for us. They said, wait a moment, that's my role. I have to say that. You have to say it's not safe. We never will be able to make it IT secure, etc., etc. So the idea behind the comment was that the complexity of our today's systems as a total is so big that it's almost important, or that you need a very big amount of resources to really have it kept safe. That's very difficult. And that's where cloud technology comes in place. I mean, that's really a standardization. And if you make use of that standardization, that's a giant step. Does that necessarily mean that we are talking about the controllers working in the Amazon cloud? No. It means that we make use of cloud technology, of standardized cloud technology. And most probably, I would predict not within the next couple of years, we will see the controller systems in an Amazon or Microsoft cloud. And that means we can control the safety and security within that area. And it is a very big support in terms of having the IT security on the level we want to have it.
That's kind of the last question. So I don't know if Klaus or Andy, you have something to add quickly to that?
Yeah, I just would underline what Friedrich just said, and I think this is again one of the reasons why we want to move as quickly as possible to a modern platform, because the mindset before, again, in this locked local system was we have a good firewall and that's good enough. And now to go back and try to fix old architecture control systems on the requirements that we would have coming from an interoperable system is a task that is impossible. So that's why we said, okay, let's encapsulate that and move as quickly as possible to a modern environment where basically security is already in the design of the solutions. And there's no way for me that I would try to patch anything from the past. Let's move forward as quickly as possible to tackle that topic.
Yeah, and I think I would just add very briefly that this is a real cultural change for us all, and each individual in the organizations are going to be responsible for basically being more open to this. And I think Fred's example where sort of he was surprised by somebody's attitude and was expecting to have to sort of push hard on that one. If we looked at things from the point of view of were we starting today from ground zero and there was no ATM, would we be doing it the way that we do it today? And my answer on that one is certain that no, it wouldn't. We wouldn't have developed the systems that we have now. So I think we need to be open with ourselves to look at things afresh, knowing the kind of challenge and change that we need to make.
Great, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Klaus. And thank you, everyone that's tuned in today. It's a really interesting discussion to have, and you can see there's so many questions we haven't managed to get through. I feel like we could talk for another hour. Particularly the ones around future role of controllers and working from home, and also we've got a lot on UTM as well, which just happens to be the subject of our next roundtable at the end of the month. Leads me nicely to that. It seems like I've been doing this a long time, so be sure to make sure you keep up with that, and I hope you can all join us for that. This webinar will be online. You'll receive an email, and it can be found at the same web page you registered at if you want to go back over anything. So yeah, that's all that remains to be done. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your day. Thank you, the panel, for attending and giving your time, and thank you the audience for being so engaged and producing so many questions. Thank you.